The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host and producer, Kristina Lew, along with co-hosts Otto, Lohse, and Paula. Paula and I worked together at the Department of Services for the Aging for a long time now, Paula. But yes, we won't say because we're both just babies, so we're not going to go into that. And Otto Lohse is a longtime friend and volunteer, and all around our the face of Project Independence, I'll say. We will be talking to Carol Ostrow this morning, who is an author, a theatrical producer, a director, an actress, a dancer, and a former high fashion model. And we're going to talk all about her story and her book, Poetry in Motion with Much Emotion, A Life Well Lived. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. I want to be part of that baby group.
Yeah, that's what we do here, of course. Absolutely. You're right. You come on the show. That's how we operate.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. And your story is so interesting. And we want to dive into, of course, all of the juicy backstory. But what I loved about your book, and this is something we were talking about during the break, is that, you came to dive into this during the COVID pandemic. And we always say that when we were doing the show, we were all doing it, via Zoom like this from our houses. And it was in real time. And we used it as like our way of expressing, our anxieties and fears. And it became kind of like our group support, and I think, from your book, reading it, that was something for you. So let's dive in. How did you get involved in this and give us the beginning?
Well, it's all been a big surprise, to tell you the truth. My mother always thought that I was going to be a journalist because I did love to write, and so I was used to it. When I was 8 years old, I wrote a play, and they performed it in school. I wrote it, produced it, acted in it, never knowing that was going to evolve into what I do at this very moment in time. So here it is during the pandemic, and I'm very creative. I love to do things and very active. And here, like everybody else, all locked away in our apartments. And I thought I was going to explode, but didn't really think about it. I just bubbled over with things to say. And I started rhyming as though I were choreographing a piece, because it has a beat. It's my own style. I mean, there are so many better poets out there, but I developed my own style, which was 8 beats to the measure. And if you ever see a program with a choreographer, they always start with it 5, 6, 7, 8, boom, 8 beats. And so that's how I did it with rhyming. And I love the challenge of words and their meanings, and double entendre as well, I might say. And so I began very immaturely, I'd say, in the beginning, and I would send it out to my friends. Well, what do you think? And they were all very, very complimentary, of course, and they weren't very good, but it was a beginning. And so I evolved by honing it and hopefully getting better at it, and wrote 2 books. Who knew? Yeah.
Carol, I'm sorry, but what's interesting to me is you have a writing skill, but I'm going to give you a short synopsis of what I think is a long trail that gives you a lot of experience, which comes out in your writing. I start out here, what I know of it is you start out in Midwood, Brooklyn, you go to East New York, you visit Brooklyn at 5 years old. Your father's a manager of Anetics, which I used to go to all the time. You meet a man on an elevator and who's a magician. You become his assistant. You end up going to Las Vegas. You end up going to Reno. You end up going to Miami. You end up going to Washington, D.C. You end up modeling. You're choreographing fashion shows. You're in a tour business. You're involved with Toastmasters. You run at an acting school. You have a ticket agency for groups, a few marital encounters along the way, and a lot of life experience. And you're now involved with producing shows on Broadway and off Broadway. To me, there's a lot of those categories by themselves we could make a show out of.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I
I
think
think our
that,
interview is done here, Carol. What do you think? Otto just
yeah.
gave like the real
No,
like
but
synopsis
I
of
think
your
the
bio.
point of that is that these poetry thoughts of yours are written with a lot of background, if you will. It's not like you were sitting in a vacuum somewhere and decided to write some stuff. I actually got your book in the Kindle version, and
You're the one. Thank you.
is that the second one?
Second, third,
You
something
bought
like
the first one.
that. First.
But to me, when people have that kind of experience in life, which so do I, it contributes greatly to what you contribute as far as this writing is concerned. It really shows a lot of deep thought that you must have put through. You had to go through your own self-analysis, basically.
Many.
You know, yeah. So was that part of it? Kind of like, just feeding back and looking back on your life and all
Oh, of
putting
course.
all these pieces together?
Yes, it's life is a lot like acting, where you use your own experience when you're playing a character, and you try to bring your experience, what has happened to you, and to have that inner life when you're playing a character. The character may not be me at all. I mean, I played a murderess at one time, and I've never killed anybody. But you try to bring life experience into that. And so I never knew how to say no. When I was in Washington, D.C., someone said, gee, you're awfully thin and tall. Why don't you model? So I said, gee, that's a good idea. And I went and auditioned and began to model. And when I saw the models, how they looked like death warmed over on the runway, I thought, gee, why don't I bring my experience of choreography that I learned as a dancer and a showgirl in Las Vegas and in Miami and cheer it up a little bit? That's the best way to sell anything, is to look lively. So I went to the Saks Fifth Avenue coordinator and said, look, I'd like to change the shows. You don't have to pay me for the first one, but see what I can do. And I'd like to have that opportunity. So life experience, it's just everything I've ever done was because my mother gave me dance lessons at 2 years old. That's all I've ever known, to be in show business and gradually to make a living that way. And so I'm in the modeling business, and I became an anorexic bulimic to stay skinny because that's the way it was in those days. And it was disturbing my health. So I didn't know any better. And I went to the women who were partners in the agency that I worked for and said, I'd like to buy in. I can't do this modeling anymore, but I can do the choreography and I want to own something. So I owned the modeling agency that I worked for. And someone came to me one day and said, you've supplied all the models for the convention of the cars and so on. Everybody came to Washington, D.C. for government and had these big conventions. And they said, can you do a tour? And I said, sure. And then I thought, well, how am I going to do a tour? I don't know anything about the tour business. So I went to
I like that
Greyhound.
you said yes first, though. I like that.
Right. Yes. No thought, just yes. And I figured, how hard could it be? It was very hard. But I just said yes. I was open to it. And I'm not so flippant with saying yes anymore. I've learned with age, you got to follow through if you want to have respect. And I can't do everything, and I don't have that same ambition or the not the ability necessarily, because I would learn from the ground up, but I don't have the energy anymore to say yes all the time. I have to be cautious. I'm getting older. Don't ask me how old. But that's the way I've always been. I just never knew enough to say no. I always thought somehow I could do it. And that must have come from my background in my background, the boys were always given the education. They were the princes, and the girls just get married. That's all they ever thought we could do. And for some reason, for my entire life, I was always trying to make something of myself, do something, accomplish something, be somebody. And so here I am today. I mean, I don't know if I've even accomplished that, but it's been a good journey along the way. And that's it. It's the journey, not necessarily where you end up. And I don't want that to be a cliche, but it's really the story of
No,
my
but
life.
it's true. Absolutely. I agree. I start, and we're going to jump all over the place because there's so many. Your backstory is so interesting. And you said at 2 years old, your mother put you in dance classes. Now, where did you have other siblings? Was your mom interested in entertainment? Was she just like, oh, my daughter likes to dance, I'm going to put her in dance class?
Now, that was very astute observation. My mother was a dancer, and she was married at 17 and worked with my father, who was in the restaurant business. I had an older brother, and he was the prince. We had some really fabulous and genius men in our family, one of whom was Dr. Carl Sagan, the most famous
Wow. Yeah.
scientist in the world. His name was Carl, mine was Carol, his sister was Carol. I have another cousin, Carol. They had no imagination. Everybody was Carl. So I wanted to stand out. But my mother was a dancer. She never realized her dreams. But she was a working woman before women really did that. But she helped my father. So she was my person that I looked up to, and I always worked. No matter what, I would work, and I worked for my father. So there was never very much ambition, but I excelled in show business. I got all this attention. Someone applauded me. It meant so much to be applauded and to be seen and to be recognized at 2 years old as a person.
Yeah.
My mother kept giving me dancing lessons, singing lessons, acting, to realize her dreams. Because as I grew up, I realized through therapy that my mother pushed me so hard because I was realizing her dreams. She was living through me vicariously, and I never wanted to disappoint her.
Yeah.
And then nobody had very much ambition for me anyway, so I just thought, I got to do this. Whatever anybody says that I should do, I'm going to try it. If I don't like it, I'll try something else. If this doesn't work, without fully realizing it until I went into therapy many years later. Why did I do all this? How did I choose all of this? But it was almost chosen for me. I mean, I didn't have to do it. I could have stayed married. I've had a few marriages and managed. And then I suppose I would have been happy. But I didn't do that. I just kept climbing and pushing because in my mind, it was never enough. I didn't do enough. If I was a model, it wasn't enough. I had to choreograph. If I choreographed, I had to own the agency. Why? I don't know. It's just me, and I accept it and have used it to make my life happier and acceptance of myself.
Yeah.
And there were many times when I said, I'm doing too much. I can't do all this. I'm president of a synagogue. I put on all their shows. I sell cemetery plots. I mean, I was a Playboy bunny and a Las Vegas showgirl, and I'm selling cemetery plots now. Why? Because it's part of the job. And I don't say no unless I really mean it and it belongs to someone else who could do it better. Maybe not better, but they're going to do it because I don't want to. I have learned to say no, finally, at this stage of my life.
I'm sorry, you mentioned president of a synagogue, and I read quite a bit about the Actors Temple. I must admit, I've probably I've worked in Manhattan for years in the sales world, and I probably walked most streets in Manhattan one time or another, and I can't remember. Maybe I just didn't pay attention, but it's on West 47th Street, the Actors Temple, and it has a tremendous history, which I read about, and I found it very interesting. It was started in 1917 And from what I can gather, you've been the president for the last almost 10 years or so, in that
Yes.
range. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that like the history there? You could tell us a little bit, but is that a place that literally you can go into just to see if you choose to, or
Well, we're a little more cautious in this day and age,
uh,
unfortunately.
yes,
I had to apply to Homeland Security. You know the situation now with anti-Semitism and the craziness that's out there. And so, no, you can't actually just walk in off the street anymore. I had a grant from Homeland Security for bulletproof doors and
wow,
cameras and special locks and entries. It's never been like that. It's just recently, but we have to be very cautious, and so
Yeah.
we are. However, our doors are open to everyone, and oh, it's a beautiful place, steeped in that history that you were alluding to. And that's how I found it. My husband, my wonderful husband, had passed away. My parents were gone. My brother was very ill. It was a very difficult time in my life. And I could have gone anywhere. I'm not religious, as a matter of fact, but I believed in my background and I believed in my history. And I wanted to say a prayer. I just needed to realize and be thankful for who and what I am, and to pay homage to my family's Jewish history. And I was looking for a place to go. I didn't want to go to the wealthier places because they didn't really need me, and I wouldn't have been comfortable there. But they were beautiful, and I looked at them, but it didn't resonate with me until one of my friends in show business said, Carol, you're going to love the Actors Temple. As you walk in, you're going to see every single Jewish star in existence, every comedian, the Marx Brothers, the Three Stooges, the Ritz Brothers, the Barry Sisters. You can't imagine all of the stars, Al Jolson, Eddie Cantor, Sophie Tucker, all pictures on the wall because they were members who, when they were on Broadway, just a few blocks away in the theaters, when they were there on a Friday night, they would come for services and then go for the backstage call to be ready to go on stage at 7:30 or whatever time. But they would come to say their prayers. I walked in, the place was a mess. The ceiling had just fallen on the right side of the sanctuary. It was old, it was decrepit, and it smelled from being musty. So I thought, oh my goodness,
Well,
maybe.
on that note, Carol, we are going to be back. We have to take a short break. After the break, we will continue talking with Carol Ostrow, author, theatrical producer, director, actress, dancer, former high fashion model, all around awesome person. We're talking about her story, her book of poetry in motion with much emotion, a life well lived. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
Welcome back to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Kristina Lew, along with my co-hosts, Paula and Otto Lohse. We're going to continue talking with Carol Ostrow, author, theatrical producer, director, actress, dancer, and former high fashion model about her story and her book, Poetry in Motion with Much Emotion, a life well lived. So Carol, before we were talking about you finding your place in the Actors Temple, so let's dive right back in.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I was told by a great friend of mine who was on the board at the time. She said, come to the Actors Temple, you're going to fit right in, you'll love it. So I walked in, and it was in such need of repair. That history was crumbling, and I thought, what a disservice to all of those who escaped Europe, the pogroms, the horrible things that they had to go through, where they could not, all of these actors and brilliant people could not reach their full potential because they were spat upon and couldn't live their lives. And they came to America, like all immigrants, to have a new life. And they weren't allowed into some of the better synagogues because entertainers were frowned upon. So they started their own synagogue called the Actors Temple. And so the history was before me, and I thought, well, maybe they can use some of my talents. Maybe I can raise some money for them and put on a show. That's neat. Let's put on a show. Let's raise money. That first year, I killed myself with another woman, Joan Finkelstein, who was on the board, and she was one of the executive directors of the Harkness Ballet. And I said to her, I'd like to put on a show. Will you help me? She said, yes. And together, the both of us put on a show a month. And during that time, I was bold enough, because I don't know enough to say no, or I can't. I just went to some of the stars and said, please come and help us to raise money. And they all said yes. So we put on shows. We did some fabulous things. Tova Felsha starred in The Queen of Mean. It was a new Broadway show. They were looking for their money. We put that on. And so many klezmer stars, one after the other, and I nearly burned myself out. But it was worth it because I could see what was to be done. We raised money. People were very generous. They didn't give hundreds of thousands or even thousands. They gave a few hundred and built up people. Now, during the virus, the pandemic, we lost so many people. Our doors were closed. And so I had to learn about videos. I knew nothing about videos except putting the phone in front of me and pressing record. But I had to learn about videos to earn money to keep our doors opened, because at that time I was the president and didn't want us to fall behind, and sold cemetery plots at this very difficult time. Earned a lot of money through that. And the videos, everybody volunteered their services, performed for us, because I didn't want to fire our staff. We have 3 in staff, an executive director, a maintenance manager, and of course our wonderful Rabbi Jill. They had to be paid, and they didn't get quite as much. We combined it with the government, and we survived. And so I'm very proud of that. That's one of
As you should be. It's certainly not easy to do it during that time, especially.
Now, it also has a theater connected with it. It's part of.
Sanctuary into a theater. So we rent it. We rent it to a theater manager who brings shows in. I built a school on the 3rd floor. They were stuck in our little basement and thought this will never do, and built on the 3rd floor a school, 2 classrooms, a little waiting room, a bathroom, and we have young people walking up and down our stairs. They have a special entrance, and we have shows there all the time. That rental has saved our lives, because I think religion may be in a little trouble. Not everybody goes anymore, and everything is on Zoom, and you can't exist on that. And so what could we do? So my business mind took over, and rentals, cemetery plots, putting on shows, everything to have this place exist in time, because it would be a terrible loss to lose all of that history. So we go on, and we'll go on. And actually, now that I'm talking so much, I realize I really ought to find a successor. It's all too much.
She's making a
you know-
to-do list while she chats with us.
But it's all so interesting, and some more history that you're connected with that won awards is, I believe I'm going to pronounce it correctly, short film Torta Bluma, which I read about, and frankly I tried to find online so I could view it, but I was unable to. So maybe if you can give us a link to that, that would be great. But
I will. I, at the time, was working as a volunteer for the Anti-Defamation League. My late husband was very important in that organization. My mother-in-law, may she rest in peace also. And I thought, well, if they're connected with it, maybe I can find something for myself, find a little place for myself to stand out. Here I am, always trying to use my talents in some way if they can be used. And sure enough, Abe Foxman was the head at the time of the Anti-Defamation League, and he was a fabulous man. And I went to him and said, look, I produce shows. I'm a good producer. I'm an organizer. I put all the pieces together. If you need a fundraiser at any time, it would be my pleasure. So he said, well, first we need the president of the Women's Auxiliary. Will you do that? And I said, sure, as I always do.
Yes, the common theme throughout the interview. Sure.
Just say yes and worry about it later.
Yeah.
And I've been on different boards before, and they'd never had a female president. And I thought, okay, I will do that. And while I'm doing that, I realized, again, I can ask Broadway stars, Jews and non-Jews, anybody who's interested in what the ADL has to say. I mean, it's a magnificent organization for everyone who is facing hatred and discrimination. So with that theme in mind, I produced a show on Broadway for them with 15 stars on Broadway called Broadway and the Anti-Defamation League, Hand in Hand Against Hate for 100 Years, which was in 2013. And just before that, I had done for them a town hall, I Am Anne Frank, the musical with Andrea Marcovici. And I made connections that way, just by being bold and going up to people that I admired and said, I'm doing this show, please be a part of it. It will mean a lot to the Jewish world, the community. Nobody ever said no to me. Can you imagine how lovely that was? So there I was with the Anti-Defamation League, and they would come to me with various scripts. Should we do this? Should we not do this? And they came to me with a film by Impact Partners, who were brilliant with their documentaries and important films. And I read the script, and I cried for 3 days. It was so beautiful. And we had hired Stellan Skarsgård to be the star. It was the day of the life of a particular man whose father was a baker. His name was Blau, Richard Blau. And it was a true story. Blau had in Vienna a beautiful Viennese coffee shop bakery. His wife's name was Bluma. So he named torta, which of course you know means cake. And he made a torta Bluma that was famous throughout all Vienna. Then the Holocaust comes in. And the opening of this beautiful movie, which was used for teaching purposes for the Anti-Defamation League, it was only 25 minutes. It opens with Richard Blau, who was now the cook for the commandant of Treblinka. Mm-hmm. And it opens with him in those pajamas serving torta Bluma to Stellan Skarsgård, who plays the commandant. And it's a day in his life where he finds out that his father is on the train to come to Treblinka. And in 25 minutes, you get the entire story of the heartbreak, the sorrow, and the horror of the Holocaust. And Stellan Skarsgård and everyone involved refused their salary. They donated it back to the Anti-Defamation League because they knew of the importance of this. And I'm very proud to have been the one to raise the money. Now, I was asked to raise the money, but I couldn't go to the ADL people because the ADL people were always giving money to a different cause. So I was told, you can't do that. And I thought, well, how in the world am I going to raise money? And I thought, I'm going to go to wealthy people who were survivors or had family of survivors. I'm going to go to them and ask them for money. And I did. And I told each of them that I was going to dedicate the film to them. I didn't say, it was a little elimination. I didn't say They were the sole ones. I had a
Right.
theme that it was dedicated to the memory of those who suffered during the Holocaust. It was mostly widows, and they didn't give me, they gave ADL the money to do this, and it was beautiful, and I'm very proud of it. And during that time, my husband passed away, so I needed something to really get lost in and not feel all of course I felt pain, but I needed something to immerse myself in completely, and dedicated myself to it. And that's
How
what I
could
did.
you,
That's how Tour de Bluma came into being.
yeah, how can you view this film? Like I went online, I tried to find it.
I will absolutely get it for you. I don't know, it's archival, and I will look for it. I'm making a note right now, and I will send it to you, Otto, with my
Yeah,
pleasure.
that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I think, Carol, like what's so special, as we sit here and listen, and you've had such a vibrant, life and just so many experiences. But what's even though things seem so, polar opposites about kind of where you ended up in life, somehow it all fits together, which is so cool. Like the fact that you're doing such important work, but you're having an entertainment spin on it. And I always think that that's the best way to really reach people and stuff. We always say it even on the show, we could sit here and lecture you and do a PowerPoint presentation, but having a conversation and adding that, entertainment aspect, which was clearly such a part of your life and identity, I think is just so incredibly special, and you're just a true pioneer in so many things in life, and always thinking outside the box, and I just think is just so incredibly special. So I could sit here all day and listen to you, Carol. I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, you know what, though? This is like we're here to talk about your book. And I think the important
Oh,
part about the book to me is that this book was written with a lot of feeling and a lot
Yeah.
of life experience.
Yeah,
And
Otto, you
I
hit the nail
found it,
right on the head.
well, I mean, I found I'm not a particularly voracious reader, but I went through your book pretty quick. And also, I think it's the kind of book that you can sort of have sitting there and occasionally take a peek. Like you have different categories within the book, which you might want to point out. Um, are we still all right for this segment? To get like there are 7 distinct parts you had in the book, and maybe kind of explain a little bit about how
yeah.
you came about those pieces to the book.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, because I wrote whatever I felt, whatever bubbled up. I thought, there's a poem. And may I read one about appearance?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
an aging Las Vegas showgirl and every truck driver's dream, but it isn't like that anymore. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, all these lines and Botox, and then I thought, well, it's acceptance. I have to accept it. So I have different categories, one of which is appearance. And so this is what I wrote on appearance one day when I was a little blue. You have to have, you have to live to the fullest. Why, oh, why are my pants fitting so tight? I woke up this morning feeling ever so slight, not having eaten a thing late last night. Why, I even denied myself that cheesecake delight. Not a morsel, not a taste, not a single bite for dessert. After so little that I consumed at the table, I tell you it's enough to make me unstable. Do I have to consider running from midnight to noon or pedal my bike halfway to the moon to use up calories that I barely consume? Well, yes, that is the truth of food and the way it is used. But please do not brood. So, in fact, just look at it this way. I promise you won't have to groan to display your body in the mirror. Turn only halfway. For heaven's sake, you've lived this long. Remember, a starving bird sings no song. Go ahead, indulge. Don't be that strong. You can eat without feeling terribly wrong. But take it from me, what I have learned this fall. just get a new pair of jeans, slightly larger, that's all. I
Well,
just,
I have a motto for this weekend. And on that note, we're going to take a break. After the break, we will continue talking with Carol Ostrow, author. I'm going to add comedian because you have me laughing over here. Theatrical producer, director, actress, dancer, and former high fashion model. All about her backstory and her book, Poetry in Motion with Much Emotion, A Life Well Lived. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
Welcome back to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Kristina Lew, along with our co-host today, Paula and Otto Lohse, and we are talking with Carol Ostrow, who is an author, theatrical producer, director, actress, dancer, and former high fashion model, about her story and her book, Poetry in Motion with Much Emotion, A Life Well Lived. Carol, before the break, we were going over some of the categories in your book. I know there's 7. We touched upon appearance, so I'd love to dive into some of the other categories.
absolutely. And I have one that is in the category of living your best life. And I just want to point out that I've tackled some very sad and difficult topics and feelings and emotions, but I always try to look on the bright side. It's just my nature. I feel sadness. I feel everything that everybody else feels. And maybe because I'm very dramatic, I might even exaggerate some of them. But I always try to look on the bright side because that's the way I choose to live. And after years of therapy, I have a choice.
Yeah.
So this one, and we all do, don't we? We all have a choice. We just don't all write about it, but it's called Tough Day Today. Laughter is so good for the proverbial soul, especially when life feels so out of control. Taking events much too seriously, you see, I did not close a deal and had an extra fee tacked onto a bill most unexpectedly. I felt all of life's vulnerabilities flashing before my very eyes in a steady bombardment that truly defies 20 good years of psychotherapy, and felt deep pains in my extremity. Well, where is that, you may ask? Well, I'm trying to add some levity, touching on the border, perhaps, of bad taste. I think everyone needs a good belly laugh, as I'm speaking on everyone else's behalf. Laughing at myself, of course, is freeing. After all, I'm simply a frail human being.
Oh,
So-
I love that.
You know that I have a phrase, the pity pot. All right, you can get on the pity pot, and we all do maybe sometimes. But I agree with what you're saying, is that doesn't get you anywhere. And I think your book and reading segments of the book, depending on circumstances, could help you get off the pity pot. To be blunt about it.
I mean, it's so wonderful to have a catharsis by writing how you feel. I mean, I can tell you that I've had problems, let's say, with friends or boyfriends, and I'm raging, which also is part of my book, a category of raging of what's going on, maybe in politics. But when I write it down, oh, you did this, and I feel you did that. When I write it down, I look at it and think, I'm not sending it.
Yeah.
It's my problem. It's how I take it. It's not their problem, and I don't have to be in the same room or be there anymore. It's so good to write. It really is, and I'm not giving you anything you haven't heard before. I'm just telling you that 2 books later has changed my life by writing. And at the end of the book, it is not a poem, but it's sort of an essay. And it's truly what I'm so grateful for. And not that we can change exactly who we are. It's mostly an acceptance of who we are and living with it. And everybody can change. There's no such thing as, oh, you'll never change, or this one won't change. If you want to, if you work on it, I truly believe, for me anyway, that I can change. But what I wrote at the end of the book, may I go ahead and read it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The joy of loving. The thing is, I absolutely love so many things in my life. Actually, the things I love are not necessarily possessions, such as something tactile that you can touch or even smell, but that too, of course. They may be the color of the fallen leaves that have turned gold and red that remind me that winter is not far away. I love how the air that's crisp with a slight chill is, reminding me to take out the warm coats stored in cloth bags all summer long, as well as the woolen sweaters resting so quietly, neatly folded in my bedroom closet. I love to cuddle with my cat Destry in the morning when she quietly strolls up to my head, just peeking out of a warm blanket in my bed, not quite ready to face the day. She gently rubs my exposed skin to remind me that she wishes to be shown affection, and it's time to feed her. I pet her soft, black and gray striped fur, listening intently to her purring. She's the best companion, and I love her dearly. I love when the phone rings at a reasonable hour, of course, and hear the voice of a dear friend chatting away about this and her activities of the day. I join in, so glad to have a schedule, interesting plans to perhaps see a brand new Broadway musical that has had a buzz in the news and marvelous reviews in the Times. It's such a joyful feeling to have good friends and share information about our daily lives. I love that. Even the non-hurtful gossip about who said what to whom. I love the ritual of deciding what clothes to wear to the office that would have to be appropriate for any evening plans as well. Should I wear those chocolate leather pants that I bought on sale at Ralph Lauren last year with a simple beige satin blouse? I love going to my favorite restaurants where the maitre d' knows my name. Then, after being seated at a quiet table in the corner of a crowded dining room, brings a glass of Prosecco to say thank you for being there. My friends love this too. Well, who wouldn't? I could go on and on about smelling the sweet fragrance of red roses in a bouquet received on my birthday, or being pleasantly surprised by a letter from a relative who wishes to spend time in New York and would like to be with me. There is, after all, so much to love and be grateful for. I do love my life and those I share it with. None of us knows how much time we have on earth. So what I would like to share with you is love every minute you have. As long as we have love, we have everything. And that includes loving yourself most of all. Right?
Very good.
A plus, Carol. Carol, I mean, you are such a perfect fit for, our overall motto of our show. After, we do our first hour, it's an interview with someone. In the second hour, we do a talk of the town where, of course, it veers off of talking about the town a little bit more about talking about our feelings. But, I'm, always walking around and I think it takes work, to tell people, how important it is to have gratitude. I'm always preaching to the family, no matter what, you have to do that, right? Because life can be heavy, right? We're in crazy times. And especially during the time that you were writing this book, during the heart of the pandemic, I mean, that was an extremely difficult time for everyone. And I think it's so easy to get sucked up in this whole, vortex of, feeling, as Otto said, on the pity pot. And it certainly isn't easy to, it takes work, right? To count your blessings and to do all these kind of positive things. But, when you kind of make that a part of your life, it really does change your outlook and your opportunity. And I think you're a perfect walking example. And I'm going to have to add, life coach to your introduction. I think that might be your next thing you should be
Yeah.
doing, some inspirational speaking, Carol.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
I tell you, it's that discipline that my mother taught me when I was 2 years old.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exercise, listen, do what you're told. I mean, I didn't always do what I was told because I must admit, but it was that discipline, getting up, brushing your teeth,
Mhm.
and taking a shower and going to the lessons. My mother taught me that, and I would wonder sometimes, where did that come from? I
Mhm.
set the alarm, get up, I've got to do it. It's almost by rote. And during the pandemic, everything was terribly upset. I mean, where did I have to go? Who cared? I had no place
Yeah.
to go. I got up and I used that discipline, which gave me a great deal of satisfaction that the discipline was still there. And
Yeah.
you can't just write because it's 2 to 4 every day. But if you designate 2 to 4, by golly, you'll get up and maybe there'll be a blank piece of paper or your screen is blank. And maybe I would use something for inspiration like watching Netflix. Oh my God, thank you. Sex and the
Carol, you part of like our audience is could be in the caregiver category, let's put it that way, or needing care one way or the other. And in your life, one of your experiences was involved with your mother as a caregiver. I understand. Maybe could you just kind of tell us how you handle that a little bit in terms of your mental view and approach? And
I actually had a double whammy. My mother was very ill, whom I took care of. And even though I had to put her in a home in Florida because at the time my husband was very ill. We had 2 fabulous years before we were married, 2 fabulous years, the first years of our marriage. And then he had his first heart attack, cancer, strokes. And the last 5 years of my husband, my beautiful husband's life, he was blind and a quadriplegic.
Oh my God.
I could not take care of him by myself. I had a nurse and her husband living with us. I had no privacy whatsoever. My entire apartment was a hospital bed and a hospital for him. And I knew what love and devotion meant. I don't want to cry because I remember those years. And he was so good, but he needed care 24 hours a day. From our beautiful life in those last 3 years, I slept on the sofa in my living room, and the nurse and her husband slept in our spare bedroom and had a bathroom. And my husband we had to take the door off of the bedroom for his wheelchair. I mean, there was so much that my life never dreamed of. Here I was married to this beautiful, wealthy, wonderful, fabulous man, and I had to take care of him with these other people who I couldn't lift him anymore. I managed because I looked in the mirror. I could have left him. I mean, there was always that choice. I could have gone, and I was working. I had my own money. But I looked at myself in the mirror and said, who are you? And what are you going to feel once he's gone? And he will be. We don't know when, but you better do the right thing. And it was really tough. I suffered a lot. However, I also had 5 stepsons, and they hated me. And they hated that I didn't give up my life to take care of my husband, because the agreement I had with my husband was that I could continue to work, but I came home every night and I was there with him, and we were together on this very sad but turned out inspirational journey. I know what it means to suffer because I was there. And my mother outlived my husband for 2 years, and she had dementia, and she needed more care than I could give her. I had to make a choice. Was I going to take care of my husband or my mother, or somehow combine both. I combined both. I was going back and forth to Florida to watch her care. My brother was alive then, and he helped me quite a bit. But I found out what love really means. I found out what being a human being means, with having that feeling that you have to put things aside. You can't do what you want to do. First of all, you have to do what must be done, or you can't live with yourself after it's all over.
You know, we all on this show have had our share of tough experiences, and you're describing as tough as they come. And I think what that gives me is that you haven't written these poems and these thoughts in La La Land. You know, you've not been in La La Land. You've been there for here and there, but you know, you've paid your dues. Let's put it that way. And you know, it's you know, we all have our story, and your story is particularly tough. And you deserve credit for doing what you did, and that's all you can do. We could talk about those problems, frankly, which is really relative to Project Independence and what its purpose is. You know, caregiving, people with dementia. Do you go to a nursing home? Don't you go to a nursing home? When does it happen? It has to happen sometime. These are all deep, deep topics, and you know, you've lived with those topics. You probably could be on this show ignoring all the other stuff, and we'll just talk about that.
Yeah, we'll bring you on every week, Carol. You just talk about a different chapter of life.
I know, remember? I learned that the caregiver can be ignored, but people don't always ask, well, how do you feel today? You know, I had a sleepless night because my husband was up all night and the night nurse didn't come. I had to diaper him. Oh, by the way, I invented an adult diaper, believe it or not, and I got the patent for it because my husband, who was a war hero, never cried a day in his life except with those adult diapers that he had to wear. And so every night for years, I would cut and make cotton and make a diaper for that man. And I had it patented. You don't get a patent unless it's an original thing.
Yeah.
But it was so much money and it was so hard, and go to China and try and get it produced and with wiki material. Don't ask. That's a story in and of itself when you have something. And I had it named. I had trademarks, but I didn't go after it after $150,000 spent on it. I thought enough is enough. It's not working. Move on. Mm-hmm. But there were so many things that I learned, and my creativity came with diapering my mother and my husband. And I did that. And but nobody asked, well, how are you feeling, Carol? And I thought, anytime I met a caregiver, the first thing I said was, how was your day? How are you coping? What do you need? It's so tough to be there. And there's such good care for the victim, poor thing, of course, and one has all the sympathy and everything for that person. The caregiver goes through hell. And I was interviewed for a magazine, Health Magazine, as a matter of fact, about the cost of healthcare, because the nurses that we had weren't covered by Medicare. Mm-hmm. We had to really delve into savings. We had to have it. And so that's
Carol, your interview, I unfortunately, we're coming to an end. You were such an inspiration. You really are, and you really should take my advice and take this on the road and do some inspirational speaking. You have such a robust life and advice to give, which I think is so special. I want to thank you so much, Carol Ostrow, for joining us, the author, theatrical producer, I'm going to say life coach, we're throwing there, director, actress, dancer, and former high fashion model. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. Thank you so much again.